Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Future Ready Leadership. My guest today, Steve Schmidt, Senior Vice President and Chief Security Officer at Amazon. Steve, thank you for joining me.
Jacob, great to be here.
So, a lot of questions that I have for you on AI and on security, but before we jump into all of those, can you give people a little bit of context and information around what do you actually do as Chief Security Officer at one of the world's largest organizations?
So I have a really fun job. My job is all about protecting customers. And we get to secure everything from satellites in space to our stores to physical delivery vehicles and everything in between. It's about building stuff that keeps our customers' trust and securing the experience all the way through delivering something to your door or shipping your packets back and forth across the planet.
And when you talk about security, what specifically are we talking about when we think security? Is it hacking? Is that specifically what it's around? Is it just kind of bad agents that are trying to constantly attack Amazon? I can't remember who I spoke with. This was a few years ago, but they were telling me also at a large organization that they're getting attacks, many of them on a daily basis, nonstop. And so they have to rely on their teams and their systems to make sure that they're repelling these attacks. And I can't remember what it was, some crazy number. I don't know. It was like hundreds a minute. It was some nutty amount. So, what exactly are you protecting Amazon customers and employees from? What's out there, Steve?
Sure. So I think that the important thing to think about here is a lot of people confuse security in the information age with technical security, the security of computer systems themselves, when in reality, this is a people problem. It's not just a
Hmm.
technology problem. If you go back to what I learned in the FBI, I spent a lot of time focused on Russian and Chinese counterintelligence. The motivators for espionage in the classic world are exactly the same thing that are motivated for hackers right now: money, ideology, influence, or ego.
Yeah.
Money's pretty straightforward. I want the money. That's your ransomware actor, someone who's trying to break into a Bitcoin exchange. Ideology, something else that you're probably pretty familiar with. Those are the nation state actors, the ones who are doing something on behalf of a country somewhere. Influence is kind of a new thing in this age, and it's about pushing the conscience of a particular part of the world in a certain direction. You should vote for this candidate versus that candidate, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And ego. I mean, this is universal. People want to show how cool they are. They aren't necessarily motivated by money. They just want to be the biggest, baddest hacker on the planet. And so it's about taking the motivation of the human beings, understanding the tools that they use, the techniques that they use, figuring out what it is that they're after, and then building defenses that help us keep those people at bay.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Bitcoin. What was it? A couple of days ago, right? Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, announced that what was it, like a $20 million ransom that hackers wanted. And to your point, it was a people problem because they had some customer service agents in India. And it's not that they penetrated the Coinbase systems, but they found some employees in India that they were trying to kind of lure and convince into sharing information. And then they could then use that information to call up customers and say, "Hey, we're from Coinbase. Here's the information we have about you. So you know we're with Coinbase. Let's change your password," or something like that. So they didn't hack the information per se. They were hacking the people to get to the information to then change the information inside the company, which I think it's very interesting. It kind of goes to what you were saying about the espionage, right? It's no longer just breaking into systems, but it's, I don't know, it's
It's
fascinating.
actually it's
Spy
going
stuff.
back to the old way of doing
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, yeah.
It used to be that you had to break into somebody's castle or their fort in order to get the information to understand what they were going to do next and where they're going to go, etc. Then we conveniently moved all this stuff onto computer systems, which were attached to networks with not awesome security. And the adversaries realized they could sit in their basement and get access to that same data if they just had decent hacking skills. So then you get this sort of back and forth where the defenders get better at defending the computer systems. So now the adversaries have to shift back to going after the people.
Hmm.
It's one of the reasons that we chose many years ago to do a lot of work on limiting our staff's access to data. So, for example, our customer service agents, the people you were talking about targeted at
Yeah.
Coinbase, they don't get to have access to any customer's information until the customer initiates a contact.
Mm,
that prevents the kind of problem that you saw in that circumstance.
yeah.
Furthermore, we have very specific tools sets that look for behavior that's out of the ordinary on any particular customer service agent. Because again, people tend to be the weakest link in
Yep.
well secured computer systems and networks.
Yeah. My mom's email was hacked recently, and it was funny because her email got hacked, and she sent out an email to everybody basically saying, "Hey, can you please get me a gift card?" I can't remember if it was like an Amazon gift card or whatever it was,
Yeah.
but like my email, I lost something, and please get me an Amazon gift card. I messaged my mom right away, and I'm like, "Mom, your email was hacked." My dad
Yep.
messaged her back, and he's like, I don't have an Amazon account, right? And then he didn't know that it was hacked. Like that's how my dad
Right.
actually thought it was my mom. And then he only figured it out when the hackers responded back and said, "Oh, it's okay. Get us a CVS gift card instead." And then my dad was like, "Okay, this is clearly BS."
Something's off here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I've had family members and friends that got hacked with Bitcoin schemes, and they were so elaborate. Of like, we have your information, you have a ticket, we're going to send you to prison unless you send us, you know, $5,000 in crypto. And I've been on speakerphone sometimes to hear them, and they sound like reputable police officers. They give you a badge
Mhm.
number, they have an American accent. I mean, you
Yeah.
it's really amazing the lengths that people are going now for espionage. And it's, to your
Yeah.
point, it's no longer the physical masks and disguises and changing accents. It's all done digitally. And especially with stuff like AI, mean, it's hard to tell anymore what is real and what's not. Which I guess brings us to the current state of AI today. What is happening in the world of AI? And when you're thinking about that in the realm of security, where are we with everything? Like, how crazy is stuff out there?
Yeah. So a lot of people think, oh, wow, it's the AI bots who are attacking everybody now. And that's really not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is something that is exactly what you just described. The threat landscape is shifting rapidly because of AI. And as with any other technology, AI brings with it the potential for misuse. We're seeing a lot of use of AI to automate things like phishing emails or social
Mm,
engineering attacks and other kinds of malicious activity like that. And realistically, what AI has done is lowered the barrier for entry. It used to be that you had to have people with specific American accents or who were native in English, so they could get the colloquialisms right in the
yeah.
phishing emails and that kind of stuff. And stuff that also required significant technical expertise can now be conducted by less sophisticated actors. Um, if you think about the phishing email as one end of the spectrum, there are such easy ways to generate code now using AI that doesn't require deep programming knowledge. So, what is happening here, and people tend to overstate the threat. It's AI is not some magical capability that suddenly transforms cybersecurity either for the bad guys or for the vendors. The reality is a lot more in the middle. It's nuanced. It is certainly an accelerant to existing techniques rather than something that's fundamentally different. So, for example, through our threat intelligence systems, what we see the adversaries doing is they use AI for research. They're really focusing on how to get from level zero of skill to level one, meaning taking somebody who's not really that skilled and giving them a boost in capabilities. And that has an output of things like what you described: better phishing emails, if better is, more likely to get clicked on. And as long as we've got humans on the other end of that browser, people are going to click on something they shouldn't. And we have
Yep.
to be ready for that. Um, we have not yet seen any real end-to-end automation of attacks where someone could simply tell an AI system, I want to go attack this target in plain English and have it execute a complete exploitation change.
Wow.
I think that will help happen in the future. It's just not happening yet. AI changes how code is created, not necessarily how the code works. And certain attacks are going to be easier to deploy and therefore more numerous. And the foundation of how we detect and respond to these, on the other hand, tends to remain the same.
So you think we're going to get to a point where I can use my AI system, let's say ChatGPT, because a lot of people are familiar with it, and I could say, let's say 5, 10 years from now, hey ChatGPT, I want you to hack into Target or Amazon or the bank and try to wire me $1 million. Not that it'll necessarily be successful, but then something like ChatGPT will actually put into place a series of processes and steps and actually try to implement something like that? Is that where we're moving towards in the coming years?
I think that AI in general will be able to execute tasks more effectively, especially agentic AI,
Yeah.
like you're describing. I think that any of the large providers of AI systems are being very careful about putting guardrails around the use of those systems to prevent exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
What'll be more interesting is the sort of less well-regulated areas. If you're
Hmm.
using an AI model from a jurisdiction that doesn't really participate in responsible AI,
Like a Chinese AI system, for example.
there are a lot of opportunities to do great things, and there are a lot of opportunities for improvement in
Mm.
some places. And people choose tools based on the ability to use them for nefarious tasks.
Here's another good question for you. How do you identify overlooked top performers? How about uncovering potential leaders or individuals with the ability to close organizational skills gaps? And how do you do all of that quickly, fairly, and accurately? The answer: human intelligence from WorkHuman. See, their number one rated employee recognition platform is a unique source of rich, authentic data. And combined with AI, that data puts previously inaccessible insights into talent and skills at your fingertips. And that's just the beginning. Human intelligence helps coach employees on what good peer to peer recognition looks like, turning every good job into better engagement, retention, and even more data. And it helps surface feel good stories that illustrate the best of your company culture. To learn how today's leading companies are turning AI into a force for good with human intelligence, go to workhuman.com. That's workhuman.com. Yeah, that's kind of a scary thought to imagine that somebody, let's say, in a part of the world like China, where it's not as regulated and where they might have more malicious actors, that has access to something like a deep seek, an advanced version of it that says, pick a zip code, pick an area code, hack into XYZ computers. Because essentially, then what happens is you have this very active form of AI that is fighting against these very static systems that we have on our computers, right? I mean, like most people, we might have firewalls, we might have antivirus, but that's probably no competition if you have like an active AI system that's trying to come after you. So you're going to lose that fight.
I think that the adversary using AI to go after you individually in your desktop computer, AI is really not going to change that threat too much because it's a confined environment. Where we'll see AI affect things more is on larger networks of computers, where getting into one doesn't necessarily give you access to everything else. So you have to keep iterating through the network. Those are all actions that are taken by humans right now. And what AI tends to do is to make those humans more effective at their ability to explore and to exploit. Um, Flip it around, though, that AI is turning out to be a really powerful tool for security professionals on the other side. Everything that we've seen has shown that we're going to be much more effective as defenders using AI than the adversaries are going to be using AI for attacks right now. We've started doing a lot of work internally on using AI to transform how we approach security at scale. And that scale part is the really important thing here. We, for example, started using AI to change the way we do our application security review process. Application security reviews are making sure that the software, the services that we vend to customers are secure by default, are built properly, et cetera. That's a hard process, tends to be human driven, adds months to development cycles. And of course, any delay makes developers unhappy. To give this a little perspective, our security teams review thousands of applications each month, taking
Wow.
deep technical analyses that involve code reviews and architecture assessments and threat modeling. This, unfortunately, in the past has created significant bottlenecks in our development pipeline. With security reviews coming into the critical path for so many teams, what we've done is we've trained a bunch of LLMs on our historical security reviews, the before, the after, and all the changes required to fix vulnerabilities. Now we've got an AI system that can identify similar issues that we've seen previously, flag them for human review, and propose a remediation. So it's literally the software developer saying, you flagged a problem. Here's what you think the right answer is to it. I agree, click go. And that
Interesting.
is something that's really changing the velocity of development.
How much is it speeding that up? So, for example, you mentioned it would take months to kind of manually review applications and test and go through all that. Now with AI, let's say I submit an application uh, to Amazon. How long now can you use AI to evaluate that application and see if it's safe?
Yeah, so the speed improvement that we're seeing is somewhere between 40 and 80%, so 40 to 80%.
Okay.
Depends on the software, depends on the system, depends on how novel it is, how new. Because remember, AI isn't creating things out of whole cloth. It's got patterns that it recognizes from its training material and said, okay, the next thing should be in this particular pattern. So if we've seen someone who's developed a lot of software in C before that's had these kinds of problems, the AI will be pretty good at saying you're going to have a similar problem if you go ahead with this stuff. Whereas
Okay.
something that's completely new may not be as great.
Okay, so it's not like it's doing it in a minute. It still does require a lot of time to go through the code and to do the tests, and then I'm assuming humans are still involved to double check.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's,
A
but if
lot of
humans,
that double check thing, actually, thanks for bringing that up, Jacob. That's super, super important. A
yeah,
lot of people think that AI is correct all the time, and it is not.
hmm,
A lot of people don't realize that AI makes mistakes.
yeah,
It's called non-determinism in some areas. So what that means is normal software is deterministic. I put the same input in, I always get the same input out the other end. You've probably had this experience with AI. You ask the same question over and over, you get different answers.
yeah, and
Um,
hallucinate, right? It
right.
gives
And sometimes
me.
you just make stuff up.
I've had that many times. For example, I'm working on a new book that'll be out at the beginning of next year on employee experience, and I interviewed 100 chief
Mhm.
human resource officers, and
Yeah.
I use AI to review the transcripts. So I put these
Hmm.
transcripts into the AI tool, and I say pull out insights, pull out quotes. It'll
Yep.
give me quotes, and then I go through and I look at the transcript and I say, wait a minute, this quote's not anywhere in the transcript. And it'll say,
Right.
and I have to argue with it. And it'll say, oh, no, it's in there. I just removed filler words and I removed this and that. And I say, okay. Then I go back to the transcript. I look for those keywords and I say, it's still not there. And then ChatGPT or whatever AI system will say, actually, I created a quote based on how this person would have said it had they said it. And so it's really interesting because you have to be when you talk to these AI systems, it's almost like you have to talk to a child, right? You have to
Mm.
say, I need a real quote from this transcript.
Yeah.
Don't make anything up. It needs to be word for word, right? It's almost like I'm talking to a child. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't understand yet that, right, what exactly what I'm looking for. It kind of assumes certain things. I've had this happen with research reports too. Let's say there's like a 200-page report. I put it into like an AI system and I say, give me the insights or quotes, and it'll just straight up make up charts,
Yeah.
make up data, make up graphs. And it'll say, I extrapolated, I pulled this together. And again, I have to go back to it and I say, okay, let's try this again. Don't make anything up. Give me only exact information and data. Like, give me the sources. It's wild. And a lot of people, if you don't know, and I guess this is where the trust factor comes in, right? Like if you don't know to double check and to challenge AI, how many people out there are just taking what a Perplexity or a ChatGPT or a Gemini or whatever AI system says as truth and using that in presentations, in talks, in debates, in strategy discussions, in whatever it is. And so that kind of freaks me out a little bit because to your point, that's very much a human problem.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen the numbers here and they're real. So if you look at what the most advanced AI agents are doing right now, they're certainly helping us do broader and deeper coverage of our environments. And for example, what used to take hours of correlation work by engineers can now be accomplished in minutes, allowing our teams to focus on more complex and critical security issues. But what's important about the approach that we've chosen, because of exactly the problem you're highlighting here, is we've intentionally designed our systems to maintain the human in the decision loop. The last testing that I saw out of Berkeley said that about 65% of the decisions that AI agents make in security processes are the correct one or the accurate one. In computer security, 65% being of the time being correct is not okay. You have to have that double check of the human. Now, as the systems improve, we may take a different view. But right now, AI agents are best used to suggest something to a human to do rather than just letting them go off and do things on their own.
You mentioned also agentic AI. Could we talk a little bit about that? So, what is
Sure.
it? What's the threat? Why is it different than just AI?
Certainly. So most people are familiar with generative AI systems like the ones you've been talking about. Those respond to questions with text or images or audio. AI agents don't just provide you back information, they actually take actions on your behalf to accomplish a specific goal. This is sort of the shift from AI that answers to AI that does. And it represents the real next frontier in artificial intelligence.
So, when you say does, so some people might say, well, AI does now. Like it'll make images, it'll write content. So I suppose when you say moving from kind of information to does, I guess that it's the type of tasks that it will do now, right? So, for example, book travel for you, sign you up for something, I don't know, like a fitness class, and I could go to my AI and say, "Hey, sign me up for this 8 a.m. class that I want to go to." It'll do it for you, or plan my vacation, book my travel, secure the hotels for this trip I want to take to Italy. It'll do that for you.
Yep.
So is that kind of the main difference? Is it's actually gonna
It takes the next step.
execute?
It doesn't just tell you what restaurant is great for someone who's got your particular interests in food with your particular dietary restrictions and has availability in a particular time frame. It actually makes the reservation for you. And the same sort of thing is happening in other areas. So with security as an example, it'll say, okay, here is what the logs say. Here is what the analysis of the logs means. Here's the likely attack path for the adversary. So we should go do these things. And then when the human says, yes, it's okay, it actually executes the protection mechanisms. So
That
it's everything from, go ahead.
I was gonna say that freaks me out. Um, Not obviously there's a lot of convenience in that, right? Make me a reservation and stuff like that. But what freaks
Mhm.
me out is just the level of connectivity and access that AI will have to everything and everyone and every company, right? Because, for example, if it has access to my banking information, my travel information, my car, my house, my mortgage, connected to Amazon, connected to everything, that to me seems like if there's one security flaw anywhere in that chain, let's say I'm making a reservation through OpenTable or Yelp through a restaurant, if somehow even that has a security flaw, like it's in there. Like it now has access to everything and anything. And I guess the challenge there is if there's a lot of, I mean, your job, man, I don't know how you sleep at night, but I would be freaking out, right? Because if somebody can get into your system and make a change, you all of a sudden, how many science fiction movies have been done like this, right? Where your profile gets changed and somebody says, yeah, my name is Jacob, and they say, no, you're not. It says here on my computer that your name is John Smith, and that you don't live at this house anymore and you don't actually own that house. And you're like, no, 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 it's mine. Like, are we going to get to that kind of a point where it's just, I don't know, people are going to be editing your information if you get hacked and you're going to have to prove who you are?
Well, I'll tell you, Jacob, AI agents really represent a fundamental shift in how applications operate. Unlike traditional software that follows fixed rules, AI agents understand what users want and can independently take actions to achieve those goals. Think of them sort of as digital assistants that can operate other software for
Yeah.
you. And this does introduce unique security challenges.
Mm.
And one of the conversation areas that I have quite often right now with business leaders is what are the things I should be worried about as a business leader in implementing these things and building them and using them. And the number one on this is exactly a point you just brought up. That's authentication and authorization. It is saying, I am Steve, and Steve can go do these things. And those who are building software should always maintain strict separation between the user's identity information and the models underneath. The reason is that approach reduces the chance of the model hallucinating or being tricked into misusing the user's credentials. Um, Number two on the list is output validation and handling, meaning always make sure that what your AI systems produce is correct and accurate before you take an action on it. That's to prevent the problem you were just talking about, where it's like, okay, I asked it to do this thing. It went ahead and did something that's completely different there because some adversary had had access to it. We always use multiple layers of verification to ensure that AI responses are appropriate, accurate, and safe. So, as an example, there for Alexa Plus, we've implemented over 50 security verification rules that validate both the prompts entering the system and the responses Alexa's coming back with before delivery of the response. You got to have guardrails for safe interaction. To get into really the tech guts of that, the third thing is you've got to have isolated code execution environments because, as you were pointing out earlier, software can be misused. It can be tricked into doing things. And for any AI system writing or running code, they have to do so in protected, isolated environments so that you contain a potential security risks to a small area, as opposed to allowing it to go across an entire system.
So
An
it's kind of
example of
like
this, yep, go ahead.
I was gonna like the visual that comes to mind are like the Titanic, for example, right?
Mm,
When it hit an iceberg and one compartment would flood, you'd have these big metal doors that would seal and then just keep the water there, and then right, so it seals kind of in compartments. And of course,
yeah.
it didn't work for the Titanic for whatever.
Didn't work for the Titanic, but it works quite regularly for more modern vessels that are
Yeah,
designed
yeah.
more
So
appropriately.
okay, so that's the idea, right? Is you
Yeah,
execute something in one compartment. If it passes, then it can go to the other compartment. And if there's an
yep,
issue in either of those compartments, kind of like the security doors seal and it can't go anywhere else.
that's right. That's
Okay.
exactly right.
Huh,
Yeah.
interesting.
A real example of that, when we built Nova Act, Nova Act is our AI model trained to perform actions on behalf of users inside a web browser. Nova Act can take actions within the browser. But outside of that environment, the agent doesn't have any access to the operating system or other browsers intentionally. So even if something goes wrong, it's just in that one spot.
Interesting. Huh, yeah. Um, but going and were those the four? Did we miss one, or was it?
There's actually a couple more: observability and audit logging. That's keeping detailed records of what the agents are doing so that you can go figure out what happened afterwards. Most people, if they're, creating recipes or doing something at home, remodel my kitchen, make the cabinets more blue and the floor darker. It doesn't really matter about records, but anytime you go into a business, especially regulated businesses, you've got to have records of who did what, why, where, how, et cetera, in order to satisfy both your customers, because you got to prove to them why
Yeah.
you did something, and regulators, because they really want to go deeply into how do these systems work. So observability and audit logging. The last thing, of course, is something that's near and dear to me. That's security testing and red teaming,
Hmm.
making sure that you actually test these systems before you ship them so that you can assure yourself that they're operating the way you expect.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess even for non-technical people, I mean, let's say for business leaders, for small business owners,
Mhm.
if you're not in IT, because to me it seems like today every company is becoming a tech company, and
Yeah,
so every employee and every leader needs to be, I don't know, a tech-driven leader, right? You can't just hide from technology and say it's an IT thing. It's Steve's responsibility and security. I don't like
right.
everyone has to play a role now. So is there some broader education training that you've done inside of Amazon where you educate all of your employees around security, and what are you teaching, what are you training so that everyone's aligned?
You're on the money here that everybody has to think about security in any company that's got the data that belongs to somebody else. And that's Amazon, and it's most businesses out there now. And it starts off with culture in many cases. So in Amazon, we built a culture of security that starts at the top. It's really starts with our CEO, Andy Jassy. I've worked for him for a number of years, and one of the reasons that I still work here, if you look at the average tenure of a CISO, it's like 18 months or something. I've been
Yeah.
here 18 years.
Wow.
It's because we've got somebody at the top of our organization who cares deeply about security. It makes my job much easier. But it drives everybody else to think about security as their responsibility, as opposed to, like you were saying earlier, oh, that's Steve's problem off in the corner.
Hmm.
Security is not about technology. It's about people. It's about culture. It's about fostering mindsets across the entire business that you've got to make sure that you keep your customers safe,
Yeah.
regardless of what you do in an organization.
Are you thinking at all about? the future of this in terms of like quantum computing?
Quantum computing is really interesting from a couple perspectives. One
And can
is
you
it's
share what that is for people not familiar with it?
Sure. So quantum in traditional computing, you either have a zero or a one. In quantum computing, it is about predicting the likelihood of something being in one place versus another. And there's a lot of physics beyond me into this whole process. But the point is that it can do a lot of calculations much more rapidly than you can do with a traditional computer. So, for example, the most common thing that people think about with quantum computing is breaking crypto,
Yeah.
about being able to decrypt stuff that used to be wrapped up inside various different crypto systems quickly. We've had to think about that for a long time for a couple reasons. One is that our adversaries out there on the internet are certainly they are looking to what quantum can do to help them break crypto, and so we've had to design things like our authentication and authorization systems to be post quantum capable, meaning that they're going to be resistant to quantum computers in the future when those things do come out.
Hmm.
The other piece about that is the nation states that are out there that operate large intercept systems, and you can guess who those are, all are looking forward to using quantum crypto to try and break the systems that we use today so that they can get access to the data that's within. So we have to build systems that give our customers protections that will help them 5, 10 years down the road when nation states do have quantum computers.
So it's possible to still protect against quantum computing because some people feel like it is the once that happens, that's game over. Because the
It is
way,
game over for traditional crypto systems. You're right. We all have to make changes. We, the tech industry, have
yeah,
to make changes to the way that we protect information and give all of our customers the easy path onto post quantum systems.
because the way that I think a lot of security works right now, right, is basically these systems have to solve very long and complex puzzles, right?
Yes.
What is it like 128 digits, and you have to figure out like the prime numbers down to a certain.
Generating very large prime numbers and then using them for some complicated math
Yeah,
is the,
yeah, yeah. And so you give these computers these very complex math problems where it's not possible for a traditional computer to figure out, but then you give it to a quantum computer, and all of a sudden it can figure it out in minutes just because of
yeah,
the ability of how fast it can.
to do math differently. Yep.
Yeah, not I was gonna say how fast, but then I realized it's not how fast it does it. It is, I don't know, how would you explain it? It's not speed. It's
It's
like,
they can approach math from fundamentally different angles and
yeah,
they
like
can
it
do
breaks the
things.
rules, right?
Yeah, and it's a really really interesting set of math problems if you're a mathematician, and the net result though is stuff that used to be so complicated it can't be solved in a reasonable period of time becomes solvable in a reasonable period of time. And so we have to design all the crypto systems to take that into account and make the new problems more complex than a quantum computer can attack in a reasonable period of time.
Yeah, which is, I guess, when you can combine AI with quantum computing, it almost makes it feel like, is security still even going to be possible at that point?
Absolutely. Security will be possible. We're going to have to do it differently though. And that's where the fun part of my job comes into it is our adversaries always evolve. So we have to evolve as well. We have to come up with new ways to approach things. Just as the adversaries are going to get better using AI, so are the defenders. We have an opportunity to do our job more quickly, to do it more importantly in much broader coverage, being able to look at all of the things as opposed to just a few things. And the thing that's actually most important to me out of this is we're giving our employees, the really smart people who work for us, a chance to focus on the really complicated problems that only humans can tackle right now, as opposed to doing the drudge work of, okay, I got to do all this analysis of all these files and correlate all these things. Let the AI and the computers handle that. And you focus on all right, what was in this person's head? Why did they choose to do that? What tool were they using to do this? And what is their sort of risk tolerance so I can see what they might be going after next? Because what do we do as defenders? We want to get ahead of that attacker. We want to predict what they're going to do next so we can get in front of them. Because not only do we want to stop them from doing something, I want to do just like the British did so well during World War II. I want to feed that attacker bogus information so they make bad decisions. and think that they're going after a computer system that has lots of interesting stuff, but instead they're talking about honeypot.
Are you worried at all about the concept of shadow AI? We used to talk about this many years ago, right, with collaboration systems, where a company would say, "Well, you need to use our internal collaboration tool," and like SharePoint or whatever. And employees were so unhappy with it that they would go out and they would create their own Yammer accounts or their own Jive or Chatter accounts. And now we're seeing the same thing with AI.
Yeah, so if you look at where AI is going right now, it's certainly something that everybody wants to use. And what we tell, well, heck, what we do internally is we recognize that we're not going to be able to stop our employees from using AI. So what we have to do is give them really good tools that they want to use, guide them in the right direction, and help them make good choices. It's a classic security problem. A lot of people think security should be, no, don't do that. That is actually the worst thing that you can do from a security perspective. Security needs to understand what the business wants to do, what they're motivated by, and help them get there safely.
These days, it feels like there isn't much good to go around in the world of work. But WorkHuman knows when we celebrate the good in each of us, we bring out the best in all of us. It's why they created the world's #1 employee recognition platform. And they didn't stop there. Combining rich recognition data with AI to create human intelligence so you can get uniquely good insights into performance, skills, engagement, and more. To learn more about how you can join their force for good, go to workhuman.com or check out their own podcast, How We Work, which explores the trends, issues, relationships, and experiences that shape our workplaces. I have a buddy of mine who works at a big company, and he said that they rolled out their own internal AI system, and he said it was so bad that they just went back to using their own personal ChatGPT account. And I hear this all the time inside of organizations. They try to roll out these AI tools to everybody, and they're just not as good. So people are just using whatever the heck they want in their personal time, right? There's free versions of everything, or 10, $20 a month. And who knows what information people are putting in there, what confidential stuff goes into these tools. It's probably on not very secured computers. So is there a way, like, what do you do with that? Because that, to me, especially at a large company like Amazon, how many employees do you have total there?
In the range of about 1.5 million employees
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
crazy. How do you 1.5 million employees? Even if you have, like, I don't know, 10% of them using their own AI tools, 150,000 employees. What do you do in that situation? Is it even possible to, like you said,
It
you can't
is it
block
is
everything?
possible, right? It is possible to identify when they're using tools that are outside of our policy expectations. And what we do then is we go to the employee and say, "Hey, we see you're trying to use this particular thing. Here's the policy in the company about it, and here's the pointer to the approved tool to do that." And if the person still goes ahead, we can see what they do and watch the data that they're putting back and forth, et cetera. We'll guys say, what's wrong with the internal tool? Where is it failing that you want to go out and use this one on the outside? And how can we help you get the internal one improved? Most companies don't have that ability because we build tools ourselves, so we can actually do that quick iteration. What do you like about this one? Why is this one better, et cetera?
Yeah.
But you hit on a really important point that in my discussions with CISOs and CTOs and CIOs, I often hear concerns about using off-the-shelf AI services, especially the free ones, like you pointed out. The risk of exposing sensitive data or dealing with unreliable outputs, which are commonly called hallucinations, are on people's minds. So I ask them to start asking questions themselves whenever they're considering using or deploying new Gen AI tools. Number one on that list, where is our data? You've got to understand how your data is handled throughout the AI workflow and ensure that it's secured and remains confidential. For example, does the provider of that tool ship your data to another country that's incompatible with the requirements that you've got for data locality or treatment of PII or whatever it is? The second piece about that is, can that provider use your data to train their model? That really matters because we have seen again and again models can be tricked into regurgitating data they've been trained on. So, do you want your confidential data to be used to train a model that somebody else may be able to get it back out of later?
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge. But to your earlier point about the tools that people use, what if they're using their personal devices, right? Personal phone, personal computer.
Yep.
I mean, in that situation, I guess there's not really much you can track, though, right? They're like,
Well, it depends on how your systems are set up. There is
yeah.
no sort of universal answer to that, of course. We allow our employees to bring their own devices. They just have to install our image, our software image on those systems. So we can keep an eye on what's going on. But, if you're using your own phone that's not connected with the business at all, sure, you can do something
Mm,
inappropriate. Now it's harder because you got to type everything in as opposed
yeah.
to being able to, move large volumes of data. But as long as there's a human on a keyboard, there's going to be an avenue of difficulty.
Yeah, yes, it'll pose a very interesting challenge, I think, in the coming years.
Mhm.
So I guess when you're looking out 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I mean, we're on ChatGPT 4.5, right? I think now, and ChatGPT 5, 6, 7, 8. What are you thinking of in terms of security, in terms of threats? What is keeping you up at night over the next, I don't know, 3 to 5 years?
Sure. I'll look at it from two different perspectives. One, as the protector of our corporate data, what happens with my queries and the associated data with them? Where does it go? How is it handled? How is it stored? Is the output of that model accurate enough? We know they're not perfect, but is it good enough to be used for business purposes, or is it just bogus? Each model has its strengths and its opportunities. And are we using the right model for the right thing? It's one of the reasons when customers say, which model do you use? The answer is we use a lot of different stuff because a lot of different models have skills that others don't. We use one particular Nova model for one thing, a different Nova model for a different thing because they're good at different things. The last on there is, do we have the proper security controls and threat models in place? Because there are ever-changing threats in the AI space. And do you have the right guardrails around the use of the model, guardrails around the use of the data? And do you keep updating them as the adversaries get better at exploiting AI models? And do you look for situations where you can help the model itself protect itself? So you can actually do training with models to help them resist attacks by attackers.
Interesting. So train the models to resist the attacks themselves.
Yes.
That's kind of a cool concept. So yeah, that's so it's kind of like AIs battling each other.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a very interesting world, I think, that we're going to be approaching in the coming years. It sounds like with these kind of tools and technologies that are out there.
For sure.
Um, so what about in terms of things like uh, deep fakes? Because there's a lot of security elements that we're talking about here, and there's one element of hacking into a system. There's another element of fooling people. And so the deep fakes, gathering information is about fooling people, not so much hacking into systems. So what do you do there?
So people are always the weakest link in systems. And you're right, people can create fakes which will fool people. So what do you do about it? Number one is responsible providers of AI, and it's, all the major organizations are signing up to be responsible AI participants, are doing things like building watermarking into systems so you can tell how and where it was made and that sort of thing. The second piece there is you have to train the humans on the other end to be skeptical. And that's hard. It is something that we spend a lot of effort on internally, is figuring out how do we acclimatize our staff to be skeptical of certain kinds of behaviors or certain kinds of actions and say, does that really make sense? Is that really Steve on the other end? How about I go back and validate that by contacting him directly and say, is this indeed Steve? So I say, for example, if you get a message from me and it's not real time and I'm saying to go do something, it is absolutely acceptable to hang up, look up my phone number on the internal system, make a phone call to me and say, did you just ask me to do this? That is completely reasonable.
Interesting. So adding that extra step in there and teaching people to do it.
Yep.
But then that also gets back into the area of trust, right? Because then are you going to be contacting, like, anytime you get a message from somebody, are you going to have to verify? Because that also seems not really scalable or practical, right? Because how many emails are you sending and getting a day? So I guess this is where maybe AI can play a role in kind of helping that verification, or is that
AI can help play in verification process because AI is actually reasonably good at detecting AI. It's
it
kind
is?
of interesting. Just
But
like
you
if you
can't
think about
prove it though, right? Like somebody
that's right.
who was telling me, somebody was telling me her daughter or somebody in her daughter's class wrote a college essay and it was all done. She did it like ChatGPT. She submitted it. The teacher ran it through some AI tool and said, "Hey, you clearly used AI for this." What's to
Mhm.
stop the student from saying, "No, I didn't"? And the teacher's going
Yeah,
to say, "Yes, you
that's a tough
did.
one,
Yes, you
and
did. I ran it through the system."
it's a he said she said, and
Exactly.
ultimately the way that we end up seeing that solved is let's take the student as an example. They're going to be shifting away from a written paper that is done in a computer in off time into, all right, here's a blue book, which you probably remember from school. Here's a pen,
Good old
write
blue
the
book.
essay in class because you can't cheat using ChatGPT then.
Yeah.
Or, you know, go back to when I went to law school, for example, we had to do oral examinations. Why?
Hmm.
Because a lot of a lawyer's job is in front of people going back and forth. But I think we'll see that more and more. If you look at a lot of doctoral programs, for example, they have an oral examination component. We will see that more and more as people cheat using AI. They'll be forced to do stuff themselves, standing up talking in front of people.
Until they get Neuralink, and then it's all game over. Because one of the things that I also worry about is the idea of if you give everybody access to these AI tools and we all become so reliant on it, are we going to forget about the human elements of work? And I use this example frequently, which is if you're going into a meeting, a strategy discussion, and let's say Steve, you're for a certain decision, and somebody else, one of your peers, is against a certain decision. And you go into your AI tool, you upload data and say, make me a bulletproof argument for this. And somebody else does the same thing and they say, make me an argument against it. And now what happens is both of you have become voice pieces for these AI tools, arguing different perspectives, but there's no human critical thinking, debate,
Right.
challenging, right? So on the surface, it might seem like everyone is getting a little bit smarter, the emails are getting a little bit more polished, but it's all fake because the second you challenge and get somebody to defend and debate whatever position they're saying, it's all going to crumble like a house of
Yeah.
cards.
They all articles, everything falls apart
Yeah.
because
So
you are literally just being a puppet as
exactly.
opposed to somebody who's really come up with this on your own.
Exactly. So, the worry is that we're going to use AI to automate a lot of people, but my worry is that people will become the voice boxes for AI. Like we are going to become the androids inside of companies, but you'll never know, right? So, how do you, in this kind of an AI and tech driven world, make sure that you still have these human elements in there, like debate, critical thinking, arguing, taking different perspectives? Like that stuff really matters, but at the same time, it's so easy to go into ChatGPT and say, "Hey, do this for me."
Mhm.
How are you inside of your company at least? Are you having these conversations? How are you navigating these two extremes?
Yeah, we are absolutely having the conversations. And we talk about even doing the benchmarking between a document that's written by a really well-educated human being who's got great judgment, et cetera, and the AI tools. And you can see
Ah.
the difference right now. You can say, okay, this argument flow was much more logical. This made more sense. It was nuanced. And more importantly, you can say, okay, that doc really shows the thought processes of this human over here. Whereas the AI tool well, it looks like an AI tool output. It's
Yeah.
got a lot of things, a lot of words, a lot of facts. It's together in reasonable English, but it doesn't have the same confidence. It doesn't have the same logic flow. It doesn't tell as good a story as a human will.
Hmm.
And that actually is one of the reasons that Amazon uses the six-page narrative as our decision making component versus a PowerPoint slide deck
Can you explain that
is
for people not familiar with it?
sure. So Amazon is not like a lot of companies in that we don't do presentations to each other using things like PowerPoint. Instead, when we go into meetings to make decisions about things or to understand problems, we use a six-page narrative, and that means that you've got, as the author of the document, 6 pages in which to write down what the problem is, how you think about the problem, what the options are, and what you think the answer should be, and why. And it does two things. One is doesn't allow someone to hide behind a presentation. Because let's face it, lots of people have done presentations where there's a lot of hand waving and a lot of talking around problems. They're
But the
not really getting
graphics
to
are
the
so
nitty gritty.
cool in those PowerPoints.
They are, and you use them for the right thing. When we do conferences, of course, we still do PowerPoints because that's the way people learn and it's a way to communicate with people. But for areas where you've got to understand a complicated problem with precision, understand where the options are for us to go forward in the future and why we should choose one option for another, we have not found a better way than looking at a 6-page narrative.
And nobody's done that with ChatGPT yet.
They try, and
So
you can
you've seen
tell.
people try.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you can
Interesting.
tell because you look at the document, you're like, this all okay, all the words here are I understand, but it just doesn't make sense the way a well-written document does.
Interesting. So what do you do in that situation? But again, you can't prove it. So I'm just really curious on the logistics. So let's say you notice
Yeah.
that somebody does that. You're doing these 6-page things, and you kind of come across something, and you're like, wait a minute, this sounds a little weird. Do you
You
go to
have a
the
conversation
employee?
with a person and you say, were you using an AI tool to do this? If so,
No.
which one did you use? Because um, there's some obvious improvement opportunities here, and let's figure out why it was that you needed to do this and what we can do to help you in the future. It should not be a penalized situation at all. It should be all about learning, and it should be about how do we go forward more successfully together in the future. If you say, "Ooh, bad person, you used AI, smack," that's not going to get improvement. And what we want is better information, better decisions more quickly where everybody's involved. I mean, those
Yeah.
are the things that we're really looking for out the other end.
And what if, and I don't know if you had this encounter yet, but if you ask somebody, did you use an AI tool, and they say no, even though you know intuitively at least that they did, what do you do there? Can you do anything there, or do you just kind of, I mean, I don't know what recourse you possibly have.
I mean, realistically speaking, if someone's using tools inappropriately to do their job, it's a performance thing, and you manage it through the performance system.
Okay.
But the thing that's really more interesting to me is why did the person choose to do that?
Yeah.
What was it that they were feeling or thinking that they needed to go down that road as opposed to doing it the way that we expect. Now, it's not to say they shouldn't use AI tools to do that. In fact, we encourage our employees to use our internal tools like Q to do analysis of large volumes of data and to create the kind of meta document components. But
Okay.
we expect them to take those pieces, validate that they're correct, because remember, we've all seen the things where the AI is not correct,
Yes.
and then put them together in a logical argument. And that is a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Hmm. Okay. So it does seem that there's a lot of training and guardrails around the use of AI
Yeah.
that's still very much going to be required for organizations before you kind of just uh, let
Jump in
everybody
with
go with
both
AI.
feet.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So we only have a few minutes left, so I thought we could wrap up with this, giving people some context around where is AI today. Like when we think of ChatGPT or Grok or whatever AI tools we have out there, where would you rate their abilities and capabilities now, and where are they going in the coming years? Because we hear stories of like sentient AI in the coming years, right? So where would you say we are now, and in 3, 4, 5 years, how crazy is it going to get with some of these tools?
I think that you came up with a really good analogy for this earlier is that a lot of the AI tools that are out there behave like children right now. They'll answer a question with some data, maybe they'll make something up erroneously, that sort of thing. What we'll see in the future is better precision, meaning everything that the AI tool says is more accurate. I'd love to say they were accurate, but I don't think we're quite there yet. Number two is completeness. We'll answer all of the question as opposed to just fragments of the question, which tends to happen with tools right now. The third is that tools will be better at suggesting alternatives or going through all of the reasons for something. Right
Hmm.
now, they tend to be kind of the monosyllabic answers to
Yeah.
something. as opposed to saying, well, I think the answer is this for these reasons. Here are the alternatives and why this one is the right one.
Hmm. So it seems like it'll get to a point at probably in the coming years, or I don't know. I mean, I kind of wonder what the next version of ChatGPT is going to look like, to be
Yeah.
honest.
I don't know if it's years or if it's months. I mean, this field is going bananas right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
And what will change a lot in the next few years is something we talked about much earlier today, and that is the agentic AI component. Having things
Yeah.
do things for you. Don't just answer questions, take actions.
Where do you think we are kind of in the world of hype as far as organizations using AI internally? Because I'm not yet familiar of any company that has gone all in with the AI stuff yet. I mean, what at least what I'm seeing is even in larger organizations, if employees have access to it, it's for basic stuff, right? Help me write a job description, help me review something. It's still very, and those things are important, but it's not deep inside the organization yet, right? It's not like we're feeding it all of our data and information and asking it to make strategic business decisions or, anything beyond kind of a superficial level impact. And I hear some executives and organizations saying that they're a little bit disillusioned with it because vendors promise certain things, but the hype and what is sold is not quite where we are in terms of reality yet. I don't know if you would agree with that or where you think we are in the whole AI, hype world, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
It is the classic problem with computer systems and marketing. I mean, when we first started the cloud business a bunch of years ago, lots of companies rush to scrub off of the front of their business brochure something and insert the word cloud because they wanted to be cloudy. I think they were seeing the same thing with AI right now, where it's,
Yeah.
this is AI driven. Oh, no, okay, sure. Show me where it actually does things. And it's going to be one of those crawl, walk, run. AI is not the solution for everything, but it certainly is in some areas. So, for
Yeah.
example, where have we operationalized AI internally? Well, obviously, we talked about my team and security earlier, but think of things like customer service. Our customer service organizations love AI because it's really good at answering very discrete, specific questions. And it is super, super good for getting customers' answers rapidly with precision and depth. And that is something that customers really, really want when they're dealing with where's my package?
Hmm.
What's the best one of this kind of thing? Show me all of the umbrellas which have these features. That is something AI is actually super good at.
Yeah. Well, the coming years will be a very interesting and fascinating place. Where can people go to learn more, either about you or some of the cool stuff that you guys are working on at, well, you're probably not going to be sharing all the stuff that you're doing inside of Amazon, but if people want to stay up to date or get your insights on this, where's a good place for them to go?
About Amazon.com.
About Amazon. Are you guys sharing some of your AI stories and stuff like that
We
there?
do. Yep,
Ah,
absolutely.
fascinating. Well, Steve, when we get the new versions of ChatGPT and all that stuff out there, we'll have to have you back on the show to talk about how the world is changing.
Awesome. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Future Ready Leadership. If you want to get access to more content on how you can become future ready, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. It's thefutureorganization.com/newsletter. And if you enjoyed this episode, please send it to somebody who you would like to see become a better leader. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you next time.